Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down The Crown Season 6. The first part of the season has just released on Netflix, and the 4 episodes have a lot that we need to talk about. There's some major differences that I want to cover in the video, but I also want to discuss some of the similarities that the show has to real life. Like The Witcher and latest Stranger Things season, Netflix have decided to split things up, and thus the second part of Season 2 will be releasing later in the year. There's a lot of things we know about the real life history too, and we can kind of determine where we're going to be going. Throughout this video we're going to be discussing it all, and if you enjoy it then please hit the thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe for our second part of the coverage, as we'll also be tackling the last half too. Without the way, huge thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into The Crown Season 6. Now the main focus of Season 6 that centers around the lead up to Diana's death and the aftermath of it. Throughout the episodes we see her getting closer to Dodi after Season 5 had her going on the Saint-Tropez holiday. As we saw last season, Dodi was engaged, and in real life this was to model Kelly Fisher. After Dodi and Diana were first photographed in July 1996, she then held a press conference to announce a lawsuit against him. This was obviously dropped in the aftermath of Dodi's death, but it did add to the negative press surrounding him, which we see playing out in the show. The series even has us at one point getting focus on 2 photographers, with one being a member of the paparazzi while the other sort of documents things purely for the royals. It really shows the differences and nuances to the industry, with the former being painted out more like a vulture. The positive press for Di leads to Charles having his own photo shoots with his sons, which is something that also happened in real life. Now, there is also the conflict between the Queen and Camilla, which has been well documented by royal historians. According to The Independent, the Queen referred to her as a wicked woman to Charles's face once, and it was made clear that she wouldn't be Queen. Back in 2005, it was stated that she would become the Princess Consort instead of the Queen Consort. However, over the years she apparently grew closer to the Queen. During the 2020s, it was told that she would eventually be Queen, and this was apparently done while the Queen was still alive, and thus it hasn't really caused any issues. Now, one of the big points of contention in the episode is what happens on the night that Dodi and Diana die. The pair go to Dodi's room, and it's at this point that he ends up proposing. After being rejected, the pair talk about how they're going to make major changes, with Dodi promising to be straight up with his father about how he feels. According to the show, his dad had put a lot of pressure on him to propose and become a man that he just didn't want to be. Before he makes an ultimatum about cutting him off, he then hangs up the call and goes off on a rant about how he really feels. Now, whether any of these events happened is of course another thing entirely, as is the build up to them that happens throughout the season. One of the main things we see happening though is Mohammed hiring a photographer, and this is to take photos of his son and Diana on a yacht. This is said to be the best photographer in the Mediterranean, with it being a big breach of privacy that causes some issues. Now apparently this never happened, though Mohammed was happy when the photo got released. He's said to have been grinning gleefully at it, showing it around to all of his friends. However, it has to be said, we don't know if he hired the photographer. Now, on top of this, other statements allege that Diana might have tipped off the paparazzi to where they were, with the Diana Chronicles alleging that she tipped them off. According to The Independent, Danielle Paris had been told by her that they'd be on that yacht, with her wanting the photo to be taken. Either way though, it's clear they stepped over the line and went way too far in harassing the pair, which eventually led to their death. As for the proposal, that didn't actually happen. However, Dodi did buy an engagement ring like what we see in the show. The ring had been delivered to Dodi's, and it was thought that he would have popped the question eventually. Engraved on it were the words "Tell me yes" in French, with him making a joke about "Tell me no" during the scene. Originally though, it was Dis-moi oui, which happens to be the name of the third entry. Hounded through the night, we don't really see the crash, and instead view it from the perspective of a dog walker. This symbolically shows how the public saw it too, with us not really being near it, but it being impactful to us all. In episode 4, Charles correctly predicts how big it's going to be, with the event being something reported on a worldwide scale. And so many people I talked to about this moment, they all remember where they were when she died, with it being something that greatly impacted a lot of people. Now, further elements of the aftermath of it are played out in The Queen, with her focus on Elizabeth's dealing of the events. It's quite a controversial moment in royal history, with 70% of Brits apparently being angered that the Queen refused to acknowledge it. However, in the end, she was apparently persuaded by Tony Blair and put out a broadcast with the family attending her funeral in the end. Blair also plays a big part in episode 1, with him going to the Queen to ask if she can have a royal position. This apparently happened as well, with Diana being given the position of Overseas Ambassador. Her legacy, of course, weighs heavily on the world, including her work with landmines that we see in the show. Episode 4 very much chronicles the public events after, with several of the characters being visited by visions of Di. It's in this that we too see the Queen's reluctance to put herself out there, with Charles later convincing her to be mother to the nation. Now, one of the main divides between the family and Di was the fact that the latter knew how to work the PR in a positive way. She seemed to be out there constantly helping others, whereas they were viewed as being more private and reserved. Her public funerals were to be a huge spectacle, and in the end it was a widely covered event. Now, behind closed doors, the Queen apparently struggled with the fact they were expected to grieve and show emotion, which is something that they tackle in the season. Keep calm and carry on, that's something the royals have basically made a stereotype, and the stiff upper lip kinda derives from them. Blair, however, convinced her that the world had changed, now the media and PR would be what kept the family stable. At the time, a quarter of people wanted to abolish the monarchy, which some chalked up to their detachment from the public. In the show after Dodi's funeral, the Queen's visited by Diana's ghost, with Elizabeth talking how much she shook up things with the family. Firstly, there was of course a divorce, and then the interview with Mon Bashir that talked about how controlling the life of a royal was. Lastly, in death, she also exposed the public issues we've discussed, and it's very clear she was a very divisive figure in the family. Now, Diana very much hammers home the point that she's basically showed what it means to be British, but in the end she has to demonstrate that she's ready to be that too. In the end, she gives her public speech with the Queen paying respect to Diana, which is shot in the same way that the broadcast appeared in real life. Now, we close out with William, Harry and Charles walking behind the carriage with Diana's coffin, with people being able to see the loss on their faces for the first time. This in itself was highly publicised too, with it being heartbreaking having to watch two sons that had just lost their mother. In the end, we have the Queen by her bed praying, and she has a glance almost to see if Diana's ghost's there. In the end, nothing appears, but it shows this plays on her mind. However, her not showing up shows that she did the right thing. Now that takes us into where the second pod is going to go, and we actually know a fair bit about it. Releasing on December 14th, it's going to have a time jump that will pick up with a slightly older William when he meets Kate Middleton. Photos of this have been released online, and it'll primarily centre around his time at St Andrew's College. It'll also lean more into Charles and Camilla, with a pair of course going on to now rule the nation. Now, the more controversial aspects like Andrew and so on, that won't be covered, and we also won't be getting a Netflix Suits crossover. It's going to be the final season of The Crown, with us also not getting a season 7, and we will leave things off where there's still a lot of story to unpack when you look at the history. In the end, it's kind of difficult to judge the season without knowing where it's going to go from here, but again, I thought the series has had a pretty solid entry. When the show first started, The Crown's coverage of Diana was always something that people wondered about how they were going to tackle it. I know it's getting slammed for taking such a focus on it, and there's a lot of controversy about the death, especially the ghosts. I think with this, it was always going to be difficult to handle it respectfully, but the actual parts, I think, were quite well put together. Where it tends to fall down as always is in the creative license stuff, like the proposal and the drama that paint people in a certain way. I think had this been released as a full season, then people may not have been as hard, but The Guardian gave it 1 star. I think Steadycut did too, and the best review I could find was from USA Today, who gave it 2.5. Now, is it that bad? No, I don't think so, and I think had this been purely a drama, that it would have been fine. However, with it focusing on real life people and an event that people strongly remember, it has angered some, especially with how they've handled certain aspects. Personally, I don't think it was that bad, but I also think it's probably the weakest season of The Crown. So far at least. It is obviously going to be interesting to see how it wraps up next month, and at that point I'll give it a full score. At the moment though, it's probably sort of a 3 out of 5, 6 out of 10 sort of thing, but I feel like the season being cut in half has damaged it quite a bit. I don't know if the finale is going to be hurt by that too, but obviously let me know your thoughts on the show below. Please like the video if you've enjoyed it, if you've learned something, and if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. You'll get early access to videos every week, and it goes such a long way to helping us out. Now if you want something else to watch, we've got a breakdown on screen right now, including Monarch, which has just dropped today. MT's going over all the Godzilla and Kong Easter eggs in it, so definitely head over there right after this. But out of the way, thank you for sticking through the video. I've been your host Paul, and I'll see you next time.